In my experience, when you hear people talk about the original Grandia game, especially people who played it for the first time near its release, you'll hear them talk about it in a way that's quite different from the other JRPGs of this era. I find that people more often use words and phrases like adventure and Saturday morning cartoon. They often refer to a childlike feeling to this game, in a positive way. The game follows Justin on his very first grand adventure, during which he just so happens to save the world. It's a charming concept, but did it connect with me?
Bloop boop boo. Bloop doop doo. Bloop doop da.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael. I'm recording this review just after getting home from work. I recently played this game for the first time. Maybe you might think that a little bit of adventure would be a nice change of pace after a 9-to-5 desk job. It's definitely a good game, but it really didn't connect with me as much as I think it did with many other YouTubers whose videos I've seen. That might be because I didn't play the game when I was younger, and I also wasn't really super into a lot of the Saturday morning cartoon type stuff, and I wasn't really into anime as much around this time either. But I'm putting all of that aside for this review, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But we all know that true objectivity really isn't possible. Grandia is a JRPG with menu-style battles. It was developed by Game Arts, and it was published by Sony in the US. Alright, so now let's go through my usual categories when I review a game, but let's do so in a spoiler-free manner. Like I said in the intro, this game's story is about a grand adventure. We follow Justin, a rambunctious but good-natured kid. His father was an adventurer who disappeared on one of his adventures. Justin wants to follow in his father's footsteps, maybe to find his father, or maybe to reach the edge of the world. Justin thinks that there's something past it, but nobody else thinks there is. He's determined to prove everybody wrong. It's a simple story that follows a lot of tropes, but I don't mind. The story is enjoyable and the tropes don't detract. In fact, they're essentially a shorthand we can follow to help us fill in the details more quickly. Grandia doesn't really attempt to subvert or rewrite any of these tropes. The aim of the storytelling isn't that high. It nails the light, fun tone it's going for. The colorful, vibrant world full of interesting characters really helps. I wouldn't say that this game has the strongest writing in the world, but it's not that big of a deal. It's also a little hard to tell whether that is due to the nature of the writing itself or due to the localization. But either way, it doesn't detract much from the game. We're not telling a deep psychological story here. This is a fun adventure. Alright, to talk about characters, let's start by going into the heroes. There are 4 at a time in your party of heroes. Some characters come and go throughout the game, but I'm going to give you just some of the ones that are definitely not spoilers for me to mention that they're in your party. Starting with Justin himself, the protagonist. He's not a silent protagonist, so that's a huge plus. He might be a 5 out of 5 if I had first played this game when I was young, I think. Maybe I'm missing that connection from early childhood playthroughs as an adult, but he's still a good character and is maybe the best voice actor of the crew. Sue, on the other hand, is a surprisingly great character and has an emotional arc that I wasn't really expecting when I was first introduced to her character. But then we have Puffy. A lot of games have these goofy animal sidekick characters. Some are better than others. Puffy's not one of my favorites. And I think one of the things that would have made me like Puffy so much more is if Puffy didn't have any lines. Like the dialogue box didn't pop up for Puffy to say puff puff every once in a while. And if there wasn't a voice actor voicing Puffy, that just seems unnecessary to me. Next we get Fina, and Fina is spunky and fun. She's somewhat of a celebrity as the more experienced adventurer, and it's fun to see how she and Justin grow and develop throughout the game. Gadwin is a strong and noble warrior, and he serves a great purpose in the story. Rap is the typical bad attitude rival, and his attitude is explained, but it doesn't quite go anywhere to give it a full satisfying arc to my taste. Maybe you like his arc more than I do. Milda also basically has no arc, but for some reason I don't mind for her. I think it's just that she's such a good-hearted, boisterous character that I don't necessarily need her to develop as much. All right, Next, on to villains. Most of the villains are recurring, which I really like. We don't really get to know any of the one-off villains that happen in the game, but we have these villains that keep coming back, so we get to really know them. Chief among them is Mullen. Unfortunately, he's a horrible voice actor, but I can't really go into why I like him anyway for spoiler reasons. I don't remember, in the game, do they say Ball or Bale? I think it's Ball. So Ball is a fun character who has some really scene-chewing, campy, evil scenes, and it seems like the voice actor at least was having a lot of fun when playing his role. Lean starts off maybe a little bland, but she gets way more interesting as the story goes on, so just hold on, she'll get better. Then we get to Saki, Nana, and Mio. I hate them so much. I don't hate the idea of a comedic trio of bumbling villains, but these three are just so annoying. To me, their motivations seem really flimsy. And really, their writing is especially weak. So is their voice acting. And I don't know if how much of that is the voice actor's fault or if they just had some of the weakest writing in the game. When we get to NPCs, I'm just gonna go through 3 of them because any more might give a little bit too much away about the game. Gantz is the childhood rival to Justin, and that character trope has been done better, but I don't mind in this case. Next we get to Lily. It's great to have a mother character who, very minor spoiler, was a former adventuring type herself, but she has a surprisingly emotional scene early on in the game that I really liked. Java is the grumpy veteran adventurer type, and we've seen that trope before, but it's always fun. I like his character a lot. Now on to diversity. This is a tricky one for this game. As is often the case in many JRPGs, every human character has the same skin tone. You'd think with bustling trade cities and people from all over the known world, we'd have some people that look a little different. There are different biomes in the world, so there are places that are really cold, there are places that are really sunny and hot. You'd think that just evolutionarily wise, we'd have some variation in skin tone, and there really isn't that much among the humans. There are other non-human races that appear in the game, but they're not human. So again, we get the issue like, you can tell an interesting story about race, but if you're doing it with non-human characters, you're sort of running the risk of suggesting that another race of actual humans in our world are not human. And I don't think that's what the creators intended. I don't think you should read it that way, but that's just a place that's like, yeah, I wish this were a little better. But again, this is still a pretty good score, so it's only a very minor tweak that I would like to see. And like I said, when there are issues of different races that come up in this game, they're actually handled pretty well most of the time. Gender balance is another potentially thorny issue in a lot of these games from the 80s and 90s, but in this case I think it's handled really well. There are definitely fewer female characters in this game, but the female characters are all pretty well written. For instance, Sue is seen as a weaker character, not because she's female, because she's younger. Although that's sort of interesting because she was kind of a powerhouse in my party, but whatever. We can compare Sue against Fina and Milda, who are both older and more experienced characters, and they're incredibly competent and confident. So I don't think that showing a female character as weaker is a bad thing at all, as long as it's not because she's female. Also, moving on, we've got Saki, Nana, and Mio. They're annoying, bumbling bimbos, but another villain, Lean, is incredibly complex and powerful. So you can have negative stereotypes and balance it with good stuff, as long as the stereotype isn't negative because the character is female, or for another option, because the character is of another race. You know, we want fully realized characters because that makes things more fun. Not because I want to check off a box on the diversity play card, because real characters are more fun. But now we get to the dialogue of the game. I talked about how the writing is generally pretty bad, but I still ended up giving the dialogue a decently high score, and that's largely because a lot of the characters do speak differently. Not everyone speaks the same way, and people speak appropriately for the characters they are. But yeah, some of this writing is just bad. Like I usually have to say, I don't know as much about graphics, so take all of this with a grain of salt. I usually end up giving graphics a 5 out of 5 for most games. Grandia is no exception. In regular gameplay, the graphics and animation are smooth and expressive. The cutscenes are usually beautiful, especially the scenes that look like old-fashioned anime. The start screen opening credits are excellent. They really instill a sense of adventure and wonder. The music really helps with that. More on that later. Sometimes the hand-drawn and computer-animated scenes don't mesh super well, but I'm generally not mad at that in this game. It's somewhat rare that these two styles are directly side by side. Okay, now for a quick commercial break. This is my first time playing this game, and I would really love to hear from people who have played it before. Would your feelings be different, do you think, if you played it for the first time older? Or for anyone who hasn't played this game before, does it look interesting to you? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat with you about this stuff. Also, while you're there, do the usual stuff, like and subscribe, and check out our playlists for more game content if you want, or if you want to look at our music content, our music theory content, which I know a lot of my subscribers are here for, and covers from video games and various pop songs. Check all those out. But for now, let's continue with this video. Design is actually such a strong point in this game. It really does feel like you're on a Saturday morning cartoon adventure by just looking at these designs. There are lots of fun and interesting elements to a lot of these designs, but the designs effectively balance consistency and variety, which can be tough for some games. This one does it excellently. The character designs usually give a good sense of who the character is. Just from looking at a design, we can often tell a character's age and what they're like in and out of battle, for instance. Some specific examples. Sue is young and not an experienced adventurer. Gadwin is older, stronger, and more seasoned. Rap is kind of a brat. And as protagonist designs go, Justin is not completely expected, so full marks for that. The various towns in the game all look cool and distinct, but they're often tough to navigate. A mini-map would have really helped here. But back to town designs. Parm effectively conveys a bustling city with a busy seaport. New Parm appropriately feels like a frontier town. Zilpadon is a fun, busy, multicultural city. The rest of the towns are various small villages of non-human characters, but they each feel distinct and have their own gimmicks. Many of the dungeons look cool. Many also have interesting gimmicks. However, the cooler looking ones are often more annoying and confusing to navigate. It's tough to balance interesting design, puzzles, and exploration, and avoid frustration at the same time. Most are fine, but a few, like the Twin Towers, are really obnoxious. The monsters in the game are mostly interesting, even though there are a lot of palette swaps. I don't mind the palette swaps for the most part, but look at these interesting devil and Medusa enemies. They look cool. Alright, sound. As usual, I have to mention that when I'm talking about sound, I'm not only talking about the music, but let's start with the music. Within the music subcategories, there are further subcategories for composition and for instrumentation. To explain the difference between these two, thinking of the instrumentation or the orchestration, would it sound cool if this were played by a solo piano instead? If it does, it likely also has strong composition. It's not a hard and fast rule, that's just a tendency that usually works pretty well for getting you what I'm talking about. It's not absolutely necessary for a piece of music to have both good composition and orchestration. For instance, for background music, like most game music is, sometimes just interesting orchestration is enough. When it comes to the composition itself, the pieces with live musicians playing it are typically incredibly good as pieces of music themselves. But sometimes the compositions are too good to be background music for a game. They feel more like classical compositions, and they don't feel as much like game music. And I'll get into an example of that later. So more on that. Sometimes the composer makes choices that work for music in general, like this is a good compositional idea, but it works better as absolute music, music that is just the thing that you're supposed to listen to, but it doesn't make me want to, for example, go and explore that ghost ship. Sometimes tension is lost in a song when it includes too much silence, which works in classical music, but doesn't work as well for background music that's supposed to encourage you to go do something. Often in games, we do want catchy loops and melodies so that we get things stuck in our head, but sometimes some of these more orchestrated, nicely composed pieces don't have those catchy melodies. The compositions for the strictly synth pieces are often just okay, but there are some exceptions in either direction, pieces that are really good and pieces that are really bad. Some compositions in the game rely just on percussion grooves, and those actually tend to work really well in this score. And the last little nitpick about the composition, some of the best compositions in the game are used a little bit too frequently, and they sort of lose their magic a little bit because they're played too often. For example, I think of The Edge of the World. It's a great composition, but it's used as a little tag, maybe a little bit too often. I want it to be more special when we hear it. I need to go on and talk a little bit more about my struggle with the cover of The Edge of the World, which you're hearing in the background here. It's a really good piece, and I struggled with my composition of trying to find anything different to do with it. Largely because it's a full orchestra piece. Like, it's much easier to do a cover of a piece that only has a dozen synth instruments, and it's hard to find something interesting to do with it in this case. At least that's what I found. This is the best shot I could give it. I'm not proud of it, but it's also not my best work. Anyway, let's go on to talking about the instruments themselves. To me, there's a notable difference in the pieces that were recorded by an orchestra and actual live musicians versus the synth compositions. And there's a difference in the quality that matches that. The things that were recorded by live musicians tend to sound better. They tend to sound more alive and real. But in the case of this game, I don't really mind that difference for the most part. There's only the occasional synth instrument itself that's pretty weak. In general, I'm fine with them. And the last little note about music in this game is that it's really cohesive, so that's great. When it comes to the sound effects, I did have some issues with the sound effects. Some of the sound effects by the human voices, like the Red Devil's wow, are silly fun, but most of the sound effects in this game get kind of annoying. Have you ever seen that meme that goes something like, "Oh no, I heard too many sounds at once and now I'm a bitch"? That applies to me, and I felt that a lot while playing Grandia, especially during battles. I like the idea of characters saying things in battle, but it turns into a cacophony so often in the game, just people screaming and saying the name of their move, and it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you have the sound effects for all of the monsters mixed in with all that noise too. I know that's sort of a trend for the more active JRPGs moving forward, so I'm about to have a bad time with this. The battles can be such a cacophony that I personally have a hard time tuning out and just focusing on the battle itself. And that might not be an issue for you though, so if this is just a me thing, then it's just a me thing. And I've already talked about the voice acting. The voice acting is pretty weak. I didn't watch a lot of anime growing up, so maybe my tolerance for this type of voice acting is just kind of low. The anime that I did start really watching and liking is a little bit later stuff that the voice acting was more dialed in and typically stronger. This type of voice acting, I've heard other people say it takes them back to a warm and cozy place, and it just doesn't do that for me. It kind of takes me out of the immersion of the game. Hopefully this is not a problem for you and it's just a problem for me. The gameplay category for Grandia comes out to mostly pretty good. I think the most frustrating subcategory is first though, the movement. It feels fine to move, but it's way too easy to get lost. So much of the surrounding area in any town or dungeon looks really similar to other things, and it's tough to get a sense for, say, where the shop is in this town, or which way you came into the dungeon when the dungeon has a lot of entrances. A mini-map would help with this a lot, as would being able to zoom out a little bit to get a bit more of a bird's eye view of the full area. Other games around this time, like Breath of Fire 3 and Xenogears, are much easier to navigate, and I'm not completely sure what makes these better. If you know, please let me know in the comments. The battles in Grandia are only a little bit better than the movement. The system for the battles is pretty fun itself, but I rarely found myself needing to focus on canceling enemy attacks. I mostly just try to hit hard and fast. The number of random battles is maybe a little bit high, but it's really not that bad, especially compared to other games from the 90s. A tiny bit more grinding is necessary than I'd like, especially grinding for magic levels. I wish that need were slightly lessened. I was pretty tired of the battles by the end of the game, but that's common for most RPGs. This one might be just a tiny bit worse than average compared to the games that directly surround it in time. I'm not sure what would make this better. Maybe more variety in the battles? Fewer battles overall? Let me know what you think. The progression mechanics are pretty good with the mana eggs, even if that progression is a bit more involved and takes a little bit longer than I'd like. The camera is good, other than wishing I could zoom it out just a bit more, like I said earlier. The learning curve and difficulty are both just about perfect for me, but I tend to like easy games, so it may not be difficult enough for you. I didn't notice any bugs in my playthrough. Okay, now let's look at the scores of professional critics. Game Rankings gave this game an 86%. Metacritic gave this game an aggregate score of 89%. If you look at just the scores that are in my formula, based on the scores that you've seen throughout this video, that comes to an 83%. My score that I feel like this game deserves is an 82%, so just about there. If you average those two scores together, we get my final score of 83%. This is where the score for Grandia fits in relation to all of the games that we've reviewed already around it. As you'll see, there's some stuff on here that you might think is a little bit too low. In general, the scores sit a little low in this scoring system, so that's one part of it. The other part of it is that some of the people who review games with me don't feel the same way about a lot of these games. Like, some of my friends score things more harshly, and some of my friends score things more favorably in general. Okay, now we get to you. Should you play this game? It's fun, it's cute, and it's nice. It doesn't do anything exceptionally well, except for maybe the adventure vibes. But it doesn't do anything especially poorly either, except for maybe the voice acting. You might be able to overlook that. So, play Grandia if you like other retro RPGs, if you don't need a deep story, and if you want to have a good time that makes you feel like a kid again. You can skip it if you need the graphics to be state-of-the-art and brand new and fancy, if you hate random encounters, or if you can't tolerate a bit of cheese, especially when it comes from things like bad voice acting. All right, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Give this video a like if you liked it, or give it a pity like if you didn't like it. It doesn't hurt. Please leave me any comments you have about this video or about this game below. I'd love to chat with you about this stuff, especially since I don't know as much about Grandia. Please subscribe if you want to see more, and you can become a member of the channel. And yeah, that's new. I just made partner. For just $1 a month, you can have access to my subscriber tier. I haven't really figured out what I want to do with it yet, so I'd love any recommendations for things you'd like to see from me that would be special for someone who wants to be a member. Some things I'm considering are special streams just for members, early access to videos, and I'll definitely be giving shout outs to new members, and members will have their names written in this screen at the end of the video. Up here is my review of Breath of Fire 3, which is the most recent retro game that I reviewed, and down here is the playlist of all of my game reviews. Check both of those out if you're interested, and that should be about it. Maintain your groovy selves.